to be talking about reeds, mouthpieces, and ligatures. So most students, when they're starting out on saxophone or clarinet, aren't given very much information about reeds, mouthpieces, and ligatures, why they're important, and kind of how they work together. So one very common misconception is that reed strength correlates to ability. I definitely see a lot of, especially younger students, feeling like they need to move up in strength as they get better. Like, oh, I should be playing on a 3. I'm in, whatever grade. That's not really a thing. So the reed strength is just gonna depend on your mouthpiece, basically. Different strengths of reeds work well with different tip openings of mouthpieces. So the tip opening is the space between basically that top of the mouthpiece and the reed. So that little, you can kind of see that little space in between the mouthpiece and the reed at the tip, that's the tip opening. So jazz mouthpieces tend to have much wider tip openings, whereas classical mouthpieces tend to have smaller tip openings. Plastic mouthpieces that most students start on are somewhere in the middle. They don't have really wide tip openings because those tend to be harder to control the sound, and they don't have really, really small tip openings either. They're somewhere in the middle. So strengths of about between like 2 and 3 should work with most plastic student mouthpieces. And basically the wider the tip opening, the softer the reed you're gonna use. So if you're using like a mouthpiece with like a 9 tip opening, you're probably gonna wanna use like a 1.5 reed, versus if you're using a mouthpiece with like a 4 tip opening, you're probably gonna want to use a much harder reed, maybe like a 4 reed strength. So yeah, just this conception that students have that they need to like progress in reed strength and that all the best players play on like 4s and 5s. Not true. I play 2.5s because I mostly play jazz and I have wide tip openings because I like loud, nice loud saxophone. So yeah, that's an important thing to know. So one important thing to know that most students don't know is that mouthpieces make a much bigger difference than you'd think. Like even more important than the saxophone itself most of the time, unless the saxophone's like completely broken or something. But you can take a really nice mouthpiece and put it on a pretty crappy saxophone and still get a decent sound out of it, versus if you take a really crappy mouthpiece and put it on a great saxophone, it's still gonna sound bad. So mouthpiece is really important, and as soon as you decide that you want to go further with saxophone, that it's important to you, I would definitely recommend getting a step up mouthpiece. So whether that's even just stepping up from your stock mouthpiece that came with the saxophone to like a Yamaha 4C, that's still plastic, but it's a little bit better. I definitely recommend, so plastic mouthpieces are kind of the bottom end, whereas hard rubber are much better. Hard rubber mouthpieces are a lot more expensive, so yeah, if you're not able to afford a more expensive mouthpiece, I totally understand. But I definitely would recommend, if you're thinking about upgrading your saxophone, probably upgrade the mouthpiece first. It would make a lot more sense to spend a couple $100 on a nice mouthpiece rather than spend a few thousand on a really nice saxophone. So yeah, mouthpieces are important. All right. Oh, also metal mouthpieces. So that's another thing. I like metal mouthpieces. I play a metal mouthpiece on my tenor. I see a lot of, especially jazz students who are a little uninformed. I've seen alto players with metal mouthpieces. No, not a wise choice. I definitely would not recommend that. Metal mouthpieces are really bright, which is great for tenor. It makes tenor sound great. It makes bari sound great. I love a metal mouthpiece on bari, but alto is already a very bright instrument. It doesn't need to be brighter. Some people can pull it off, you know, David Sanborn, like, but it's one of the few people that I've even heard of that uses a metal mouthpiece on an alto. So, like, definitely would not recommend it, especially for a high school student. Like, it's not a great choice, and definitely not for a soprano. Like, ew, no. So yeah, that's just a little note on metal mouthpieces. If you play tenor or bari, go for it. Yeah, definitely. They are a little bit harder to control at first, but you'll get used to it, and they're great. But not for alto. All right. Oh, and then jazz versus classical mouthpieces. There's definitely a difference there. So again, once you're starting to get more interested in the saxophone and you want to, if you're playing a lot of jazz or a lot of classical, or I mean, maybe get one of each, definitely going into college, you're gonna want, if you play both jazz and classical, you're gonna want separate mouthpieces. High school, it's a little, I don't know. Most of my students, if they really like jazz, I recommend they get a jazz mouthpiece and then just play their old mouthpiece in classical, or just play their old mouthpiece in concert band. You definitely don't want to play a jazz mouthpiece in concert band because it's just like way too loud. But the basic difference between jazz and classical mouthpieces is that, like I said before, jazz mouthpieces tend to have a larger tip opening. Classical mouthpieces tend to have a smaller tip opening. Also, jazz mouthpieces will have a round bore. So if you look down the mouthpiece, you see that it is round on the inside, whereas a classical mouthpiece will be square. Or some of them are like kind of square and then partially round. It just kind of depends on the mouthpiece, but most of them are square. Another thing you can see on mouthpieces is a baffle, and that will only be on jazz mouthpieces. And it's just like, there's not one on this one, but it'll be kind of like a little table that like comes out and then like sharply drops off. It's just kind of this thing. That's a baffle, and that really just kind of directs the air and makes it brighter, basically. So a mouthpiece with a baffle is going to be very like loud and piercing and bright, which can be, you know, good for, probably best for pop, like kind of like pop or funk, or like those types of gigs. Funk band would be good, something that you really want to like cut through. So that's that. All right, another thing we should probably touch on is ligatures. So ligatures are also more important than you would think. They basically bind the reed to the mouthpiece, so they affect the sound quite a bit because they are touching the reed, which is the thing that is vibrating and making sound. So one thing that I see a lot is students with their Rovner ligatures. So that's those black kind of, I don't think they're leather, but like, yeah, if you have one, you know what I'm talking about. It's just kind of the black sort of like fabric type mouthpiece. Unless you have one that has like some sort of plate inside of it that holds the reed down, which I'm not sure. I used to have a Rovner, got rid of it, but they're not great. They're really not great. They make your sound fuzzy. They really like. So think about the way a ligature works. It holds the reed down to the mouthpiece, and you want a firm kind of table for that to sit on the reed. This one, it's Van Doren Optimum. I like these, they're good. This one has like a couple ridges, so it kind of minimizes the area that's touching the reed, which is ideal because you don't want a lot of surface area touching that reed because it's going to dampen the vibrations. So with a Rovner, it's a lot more surface area, just kind of like smushing down on that reed, not holding it down very firmly either. So it's just going to make the sound pretty fuzzy. Yeah, I definitely don't recommend those. They're really not great. But yeah, a lot of metal ligatures are decent. They're fine. I'm not a big gearhead, so I haven't like played around with a lot of different ones, but Van Doren Optimum is definitely solid, and like most people I know use these. I'm using a Selmer something on my tenor. If I remember, I'll put it in the description, but it's a Selmer something. I like it. It works for my metal Van Doren V16. But anyway, ligatures, they're more important than you think. All right, and then another final thing I want to talk about is how to break in reeds. So a lot of students aren't ever taught how to properly treat their reeds or break in their reeds. First of all, don't soak them in water. That's a pretty common misconception people have. Yeah, it's you may see like oboists or bassoonists soaking their reeds in water. I think that's necessary for them. Their reeds are different than ours though. So with saxophone and clarinet, you never want to soak your reeds in water because it's just too much moisture and they get waterlogged really fast. So that will cause them to just really not play properly, and yeah, they just kind of like stop working pretty well. So yeah, don't soak them in water. It's gonna waterlog them, and it's really not gonna be great. So when you're breaking in a new reed, when you first take it out of the package, you have to give it some time to acclimate, which means you don't want to play it a bunch. You don't want to like take it out of the package and then play it for like 2 hours. That's gonna essentially do the same thing as soaking it in water. It's just gonna waterlog it, and then it's kind of done. It's just like, it's gonna get warped and weird and just like not play very well. So what you want to do is when you first take it out, play it for like a minute and then put it away. Next day, play it for maybe 5 minutes, then put it away. Day after that, maybe 10 minutes, put it away. Day after that, maybe 20, put it away. Day after that, maybe 30, then put it away. And then after that, you can probably play it normally. About 5 days if you're playing it every day. Should be enough time to break in a reed. But yeah, that's how I would recommend breaking in reeds. I know there might be certain situations where you just need to play a new reed a bunch right away, and it might be fine. Yeah, just kind of depends on the weather and a bunch of different things, but it might be fine if you have to. But I would recommend not. So the best thing to do is have a bunch of reeds in the process of being broken in. So like start maybe one day breaking in one reed, and then a few days later try starting breaking in another reed, and just kind of have a bunch of them in the process of being broken in. So that's my spiel on reeds. All right, so I hope that was useful for you. Some reed, mouthpiece, and ligature tips. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.